Hey everyone, welcome to our video. Today we're going to be talking about podcasting with Mich Hancock, and I just have to find and invite her, which is always so fun. Always get these technical difficulties. And I'm really excited because Mich, here we go, I just invited her. Mich is really talented, and she is the co-founder of 100th Monkey Media. She is also the co-founder of Tedx Gateway Arch. So we've got, if you got questions about social media marketing or about TED Talks, you could probably bring those questions here as well. But in particular, we're talking with Mich today because she does podcasting as part of her marketing mix for her business, and that's really what I wanted to talk to her about today. And I sent her an invite. I don't know if she's got it yet. Yes, bringing her on. And while she's getting at it, let me just give a couple of announcements. One is that my company, our sponsor, Brightworks PR Marketing, has new on-demand LinkedIn training. So if
hello. I'm here, and can you see me?
I can see you, yeah. So let me wrap up with just a couple announcements, and then we'll dive in. So if you're interested in learning more about LinkedIn marketing and you want to get involved in that, I put the link in the description of this video. And then just to give you an update of what's coming up in speakers next month, we had a little bit of change. It was going to be Paul Barton, who's going to talk to us about public speaking and using that to get clients. He had a conflict, so we had to reschedule him. So this next month we've got a great person. Her name is Amanda Lehman. She's going to be talking to us about content marketing. And then the month after that, that's September 20th. And then in October, my good friend Adam Kreitman is going to talk to us about SEO, which Mich knows Adam as well. So I can see that smile. Yeah. But today we've got the wonderful Mich Hancock. Thank you so much for being here, Mich.
Thank you, dear. I'm excited to do this. This is my first live Facebook interview.
Oh, very cool. And it's on your cell phone, right? That's where so it's you get the whole experience.
I'm here.
Well, really cool. So I kind of gave a little bit of a background on you. I just said that you own 100th Monkey Media and that you're co-founder of Tedx Gateway Arch. But tell us a little bit about you and your experience and your background.
Cool beans. So social media, I love it. And when it first came onto the scene, and it was sort of the Wild West, right? No one knew exactly, there weren't any rules. No one knew what to do with it. So when my feeling was looking at social media, and I just like, this is not going away. This is a thing, and it's going to be a powerful thing because you can connect to so many people. But what do I want to do with this? Because I felt like all of my weird skills made sense when social media showed up. So we started the business really just posting, and have matured with social media as it matures. And during that time, I was asked or had the opportunity to become a part of Tedx Gateway Arch, which way fun. TED Talks. I mean, if you love TED Talks or you're a TED head, I love you. Be a part of my world. And then in the midst of all that, because I cannot sit still, I was like, oh, I think I'll do a podcast as well. So I started the podcast. I've also recently just did a pilot with HEC TV called Arch Fair, which brings together innovative people, talk, and cuisine. So we'll see where that goes, but I like to play. That's basically it.
Well, really cool. And I know, so how long have you been involved with, we're not really talking about TEDx, but how long have you been involved with TEDx? It's been a few years now, right?
Well, yeah, about 6 years. And we had a lot of events that we've done. We actually are on a little bit of a break. We had some foundational, just some things we wanted to solidify a little bit more before we went off and did more events. So like, let's take a break and breathe and, create that strong foundation in order to get to the next level. So that's where we're at right now. But it's an absolute joy. I get to meet amazing people, very innovative people in our city that are just doing things to help evolve the human race, which I'm all for that. So yeah.
Well, cool. And I think, we could probably have a whole discussion on TED Talks and TEDx. So maybe we'll have you back and have that discussion. If somebody out there is thinking about maybe I want to do a TED Talk, feel free to ask that question, and we'll bring it here to Mich. But so you and I, in preparation for this, basically said, hey, prepare your 3 tips on podcasting. That was the only direction I gave. So what do you got for us? Is this like getting started, or is this like maximizing it? What are we going to talk about?
Well, I think first and foremost, there's so many people that come to me and say, I want to do a podcast. I bought all the equipment that I need. How do I get started? Well, I personally do not have any equipment. That would have been a block for me to have to set it up and do it on my own. So I chose to go to a studio. So I think that's the first thing is, how are you going to make it happen? If you buy all the equipment, but you're not actually going to do it, then how about just go to a professional studio and get it done? So I'm at Shock City Studios, and for me, it's super easy. I walk in, I do my podcast, and the next day the podcast is in Dropbox, and I can put it out there into the universe. The other thing that's really important is having a format. So it's one thing to say, I'm going to do a podcast and I'm going to have these people on and this is what we're going to talk about, but what is the format of that podcast and what makes it unique? So for me, what I've done to make it unique is at the end of each of my podcasts, I ask 3 questions that the guest they have no idea what questions I'm going to ask them. And it is definitely not meant to stump them. It's really just a way to take the conversation we had, throw it up in the air, and let's see where this takes us. You know, and a lot of the questions are fun. They're all in their wheelhouse. I'm not asking them mathematical equations or anything like that. It's just a way to get the conversation going into new directions. And my other thought is talk about what you love, because that is how you're going to be able to sustain this thing. If you're doing something you don't really like, we all know this, and it's just not going to sustain you. And it has to be a subject where you are going to be able to have a lot of podcasts, because one of the problems with people that's starting podcasts is after 7 to 10, they're done. They've gone through all of it, or they don't have any more guests, So you have to have something that's really sustainable, that you're going to be able to, you're going to have enough guests, you have enough to talk about. I have a friend, a Tedx friend of mine, actually, that he lives in England, and he just started a podcast and sent me the first one and said, what do you think? And though I loved his podcast, I said, I think you're asking too much of your guests, because he was asking guests to come up with 5 TED Talks to support why they're doing what they're doing now. And his friends may do that for him, but after a while, you're going to run out of people that are like, oh, let me put tons of time into it. You know what I mean? Yeah. People are busy. So you have, my guests are like, how should I prepare? I'm like, you're already prepared, because really they're coming on, like I am, to talk about what they do. So they already know what they do. They know why they do it. It's very easy for them. It's show up, do it. They love it. They have fun, and then we're done.
That's really interesting, because I think, to your point, I think sometimes we think about content, we're like, okay, what's like the step-by-step, how do I get there? And if that's okay for maybe like 1 or 2 episodes, but for an ongoing content piece like podcasting, it's got to be an evergreen subject where it's very easy for you to bring it in and keep having conversations about it.
In fact, when I was first asked to do podcasting, they were like, you should do a social media podcast. And I was like, yeah, okay. And when I thought about it, I thought, oh, no, social media changes every 5 seconds. I don't want to have a podcast where you have to listen to the last one and that's the one that counts, and none of the other ones are really, don't go back 2 years. Whereas I have on really interesting people. So you can listen to however many years ago. I've just accomplished my 114th podcast. So you can start at square one, and all these people have interesting things to say. It needs to be evergreen. I think that's a big part of it. And another good tip I have for people is before you put your first podcast out there, maybe get 5 or so and put those all out at once. Because if people like it and then they're sitting around waiting for the second one, at least they've got a number to start with.
Then they can binge it, is what you're saying.
Yeah,
so you want to 5.
Netflix started that whole thing.
Yeah. That's interesting, because, I would think get 5 in the hole so that you can, have some breathing room and like release 5 at a time. But you're saying, no, just put all 5 up so that they can binge it and enjoy and get hooked on your program.
Because if they listen to the first one and then they're thinking, well, I wonder when the second one comes, at least they can go for a while.
Yeah. Yeah, and it kind of gives this idea that you've been doing it for a while, even if you haven't been. You've been
There
doing it
you
for a
go.
bit. So
It's
did you
on the
say
illusion.
114? Is that how many you said you've done?
Yes.
So how long did it take you to get to 114? Is that like a couple years? Is that like 2 months?
Yeah. So I do one a week. But I actually
Okay.
record two at a time. So every other
Okay.
week I go to the studio, I do 2 podcasts, and then I've got those 2 for the week. Um, and and I listen to them afterwards. So I remember all the things we talked about, and then I just do sort of a running stream of here's all the stuff we talked about, but it's like disjointed and doesn't make any sense. So the whole idea is you're looking at going, how did they get from that subject to the other? Let's listen. But I'm
Interesting.
really good at tangents. Yeah, I can just go off into somewhere without.
So how important is, because what you just mentioned was basically batching, right? You're doing 2 at a time every time you go into record. So how important is batching your time or getting it so that you're doing multiple things that obviously you chose to have someone else help you with it, which I think is really smart. But
Right.
like for you in terms of time, how important is batching it and what things do we need to think about batching?
Well, for me, it is important because I'm driving to a studio and I need to get people there, and I'm looking at who do I want on my podcast, and really the people that come on the podcast are, we have all of our TEDx speakers have been on the podcast, but then there are people that I meet along the way that I think they've got a great story, or they're really innovative in their thought, or they're doing something interesting. Let's have them on. But for me, it's just really easy. It's a lot easier to do 2 at a time. I think if I was trying to do 4 or 5 at a time, that's just a lot. I have to
Yeah.
keep up my energy and be all Mish like what I'm doing. And so it just feels right to do 2 at a time for me.
Yeah, really good. And I think, I just keep thinking how smart it is for you to go pro and get help because I started, when I started my YouTube channel, I also started a podcast and it was really apparent after 1 week. I was like, both of these require so much time. I
Yes.
can't do both. So I X'd the podcast and stuck with video. So I think it's just so smart that you're like, hey, you know what? I don't want to put all this time into it. Go pro, get some help. I think it's a great advice.
Well, and so that's the thing, like when you really want to do something, and if you're not doing it, the first question I always ask is, what is the block? You really want to do this, but you're not doing it. So what's the block? And for a number of us, it is time. I don't have time. I don't have time
Yeah.
to do all this. I mean, for me right now with the podcast, what do I not have time to do is to really push it out there. So I will be enlisting a person soon that's going to help me. My buddy Vernon Ross is amazing at that. He knows all the places to put podcasts and help you to get sponsorship and all that stuff I'm supposed to be doing. I'm not doing it because I'm running a business and I'm doing TEDx, I'm doing all this other stuff. So the
Yeah.
block to me really taking it to the next level is that I don't have time to do that. So I need to hire somebody who can help me make that happen.
Well, interesting. So talk to me about, so you mentioned the 2 things that I think most people are going to be interested in, and one is how do you make money, right? You mentioned sponsorships, but maybe there's other things you can fill us in on. And the second is how do you grow listenership? Like what's the approach to grow a podcast?
So, and again, this is like Michs 2.0, but sponsorship is big and it's not easy to get. So one of the things that Vernon is going to help me with is figuring out exactly who my people are, who is listening, so that I know what type of sponsors I should be going after. There are ways through different podcast stations out there. There are ways to monetize it through advertising. So you can put it on different platforms. And if somebody says, hey, I want to advertise on her show, that's a way to bring in money. So you're not putting out all the money to do your podcast. You're maybe balancing it. So it's $0 on your end. And then listenership is really getting it out there on all the different channels. And there's so many channels. I mean, there's Stitcher and there's iTunes and there's SoundCloud, and it's overwhelming. And so for me, that's been the block with really taking it to the next levels. I need a professional person that can just do this. So I don't have to research it and figure it out on my own. And, I don't have time for that right now. Or I won't do
Yeah,
it. I just know I won't.
I really love what you're saying, and I'm trying to think of the phrase, and I have to write it down so I can remember. So the phrase that I like to say is eliminate, automate, then delegate. And
Yeah.
you're really shining through. You know, we're here to talk about podcasting, but you're really shining through as the business owner in this, and really demonstrating for everybody how you should show up as the CEO in your business. Because if you don't, you know, if you keep focusing on those blocks and like you don't eliminate, automate, delegate, and you just keep going, then you're going to get stuck and you're not going to get the traction in your business. So you're really
Exactly.
modeling that really well for us, and I really appreciate that. I think that's great.
Well, and I have a tendency, so people that know me really well know that my mantra is fire, ready, aim. So I really believe in going forward with something and see, just kind of like, do I want to do this? And so kind of starting it. And then once you're like, yeah, I'm totally going to do this, then you go ready, aim it.
Gotcha.
You
So
know, and a lot of people are stuck, like they won't just go,
uh-huh.
right?
Yeah, and it really is the difference. I mean, the difference between like a dream and reality, or the difference between having something and not, is that action. Like you can plan and think all you want, but if you don't just do something. And I think, you know, my personality is probably really close to yours, where I like to get stuff done. And I've got
Yeah.
this idea, I'm going to do it, and I get it done. But I think there is something to say about, a little bit of planning, a little bit of training too is important.
Oh, right.
So
For the
go ahead.
podcast, I really did do, like, I decided, yeah, I said yes to a podcast before I really knew anything else. And then
Uh-huh.
I'm thinking, I can probably have a format. I probably, so a few weeks before that, I was like, okay, let me think about what this is going to look like, you know, and I don't think I can reveal who this is yet, but, I met a person who's starting a podcast, and there was a bit of brainstorming around all of it. And one of the things they decided on their podcast was that the length of the podcast was going to be how long it took for the host to drink a bottle of wine. And I thought that was brilliant, right? I mean, that is really something unique. That makes you say, well, I'm going to have to check that out. What are they? Of course, it was like, don't do four podcasts at a time. That might create issues for you.
Batching for them is a bad idea. Yeah. So let's go back to this idea of sponsorship. Just because the thought I'm having, and I just want to get your thoughts on it, is, before you have a sponsor for your podcast, I feel like you should sponsor it yourself, right? Like you should treat yourself as a sponsor and
Oh,
throw
right.
in your own. So how do you do that? Do you have like commercials for your service, or do you just kind of weave it into the content? How do
Oh,
you
I
promote
did.
yourself?
I did in the beginning. I had commercials for my service. I felt like that was getting to be annoying at a certain point. So now I just have space for other sponsors, and I will get there. But on the other side of it is the branding. So for me, putting myself out there with the podcast and everything else I do, it's interesting to me that people think I must not ever sleep. You're
Uh-huh.
always doing something. You're always out and about. You're always doing something. Well, I really don't feel like I'm constantly on, but it looks like I am because of all the things that I do. And
Yeah.
because I bring my personality forth and I get to talk to people and they get to learn a little bit about me as well as the guests in every episode, I think it's been really good for my branding. And just to have people that come up to you and say, oh my gosh, I love your podcast. I was listening to it and I learned this. I was at MDMC, the Midwest Digital Marketing Conference that they did
Uh-huh.
back in March. And it was so fun to have people just come up and hug you and say, oh my gosh, I love you so much. I listen to you all the time. That to me is a great way to showcase who you are as a person. Because as you and I both know, we can be great business people, but people want to do business with people that they like and that they feel that they
Yeah.
understand.
Yeah, and I think that when you start doing this, I call them brand builders, but it's like, video content, audio or written content like a blog or a podcast. You get this sort of one-sided relationship where you don't know the person personally, you don't know them, but they
Right.
start building a relationship with you. And I've had those same experiences where I'll go to a conference or I'll go somewhere, I'll take a phone call, they're like, I've watched every single one of your YouTube videos. And you're like, I
You
guess you
have.
know me. I guess
You're
we're
my
like best
fan.
friends. I'm just meeting you, but you already know me, so that's fun. And that's an interesting experience. But I think that just proves exactly what you're saying. Is it's like, some people, when you have a product that solves a problem and they're ready for it, they'll purchase right away. Other
Right.
people, they need that know, like, trust factor to build, and using something like a podcast is a great idea to grow that know, like, trust factor, get them to have that relationship, and then they'll pull the trigger and purchase.
Well, exactly. And I mean, and I really love, I mean, one of my favorite things is connecting with people. And then my other favorite thing is social media, which, hello, that connects everybody, right? And so to me, anything that you can do to really connect with others, and yeah, you're connecting digitally, but a podcast, what's interesting about that is that you're in their ear a lot of times, right?
Yeah.
So they're like, it's a really intimate experience in many ways for the listener. So when you're in their ear and you are talking to them, there's connection that's being made. And maybe you don't know it, but I'm telling you, I feel it. Like I can totally feel the love when we're
Mhm.
doing our live Facebook, because we do live when we do the podcast. It's one of the ways that people know that you're doing it. I think it definitely took my podcast up to the next level when I went live on Facebook with it.
So you're doing Facebook Lives while you're recording the podcast. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, and then you get to see the behind the scenes, right? You get to see
Yeah,
that
that's
they
interesting.
come in, what it looks like when we're getting everything set up, the chit chat that goes on during breaks. It kind of gives you that behind the scenes, which is fun for people.
So where are you hosting the Facebook Live on, like, your personal page, or
Personal,
do you have a business
personal
page?
page. Yep,
Your
I do it on
personal
my
page.
personal page. Yep.
That's really interesting to me because I think you could use that, if you had like a public figure page or your personal page, you can actually grow your viewership, just like you said, by kind of, I mean, you could even boost those posts, or you could do stuff to kind of grow that through Facebook. I think that's a great tip.
It's a really good idea. And because, there were so many of my connections. And I mean, I connect with everybody. I love everybody. I'm not like, oh, I have to know you before I connect with you on Facebook. Generally speaking, if you're a fake account, I don't connect with you. Like I see through those. I'm just letting you know. But if you're not a fake account, I will connect with you. And when I went live on Facebook, I had so many people say, I didn't even know you were doing a podcast.
Yeah.
I have like 20 of them, at the time. So it was good to bring that out there. And, you and I both know if you've got great content, repurpose it, put it where you can.
Right. Yeah, and I think one of the things I say all the time, if you want to dominate the world, start local, right? Like if you want a business empire that spans the world, start local. And it's kind of the same principle you're saying here, is if you want to grow a podcast, start with your network, your current network.
Right.
And
Then you get
Facebook,
organic
yeah.
reach. You can do paid reach later, but at least you can start with getting that organic reach going.
And I think that you could probably do something similar. I know I've had a lot of success with YouTube and LinkedIn. And LinkedIn is great because you can actually grow, like, your connections with a certain audience. Like you can target people and connect with them and
Right.
grow it. And so I'm assuming you could probably use a similar tactic to, like, connect with people on LinkedIn and then promote your podcast to them. And if it's applicable, you're going to grow your viewership. So again,
Oh
another
my,
organic and paid.
LinkedIn is such a robust, I love LinkedIn. LinkedIn amazes me what you can do with it. And when people are like, oh, I don't really work LinkedIn, I'm like, oh gosh, do. It's very helpful because, that's what I love about LinkedIn is everybody knows why they're there. We're all
Yeah.
there growing our business, right? So it's a little bit different than, well, I'm on Facebook and I can't stand when people do ads to me, right? I'm just trying to talk to my friends. You get a little bit of that with
Yeah.
people, but with LinkedIn, that's what we're doing. We're all here to grow our business. So people tend to be a little bit more receptive when you're reaching out to them.
So I know that you and I both do a lot with LinkedIn. You do more with social media than I do, but LinkedIn in particular. And so I'm wondering if, you saying that makes me wonder if you're seeing this too. I'm seeing a lot of people start to abuse LinkedIn in terms of like, I get emails and messages every day of people, like, they just connect with me and now they're like, hey, you're on my newsletter, or hey,
Right away, yeah.
try this
And
stuff. Yeah.
do that because that right away you feel like, oh, you just wanted to connect me so you could to market to me,
Right.
you know.
So if you wanted to promote your podcast with LinkedIn, what would you tell people to do? If someone said, hey, I've got a podcast, I want to use LinkedIn, Mish, what do I do?
Well, definitely post about it. But I think that you also have to figure out who exactly your audience is so that you're connecting with the right people for that. And, you know, you and I both love LinkedIn campaigns, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so LinkedIn campaigns are a way to let everybody within your network know what you're doing. And again, I go back to the fact that we are on LinkedIn all growing our business. And so it doesn't feel as bothersome, you know, when you're sending information to people going, hey, listen, I'm reaching out to my LinkedIn network. I'd like to let you know what I'm doing here. I think that that's a great way to talk to people. And please don't send anything that's like 8 paragraphs long. I've seen that and you're like, really? I'm not gonna read this. You know, just short, to the point. Hey, wanted to let you know I'm doing this. Here's an idea, here's an opportunity, here's a thought, whatever, and there you go.
Yeah, I love it. It's this casual tone versus like a salesy tone, or like, you know, it's a professional network, but don't send them a sales brochure. Send them
Oh,
it's building relationships. It's like, it's digital networking. That's what it is.
right, exactly.
Well, cool. So, if someone wanted to get started with podcasting, they say, "Hey, Mish just sold me on it. I can really see the vision behind it." What would you? I mean, you gave us those 3 tips, right? You said decide to go solo or pro, get a format, and talk about something you love. But is there
Right.
anything else you'd say? Hey, if you want to do this, this is the number one thing Mish would tell you to do.
The number one thing, have something interesting.
Okay.
Talk about something interesting. You know, so the thing I love about social media is you've been able to create, and people are able to create an audience. So no matter what you're interested in, whether it be, I don't know, you're into antique collecting, okay? But you have an audience. There's an audience out there that loves that. And
Yeah.
so now you have to go find that audience and connect with them. And people, you know, I get clients that are sort of obsessed with, I want to get thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of followers, but maybe what they're doing isn't really necessary. They're not going to get thousands of followers. But they're going to get their tribe. They're going to find them, you know? So maybe don't be so obsessed with the numbers as much as the people that you attract. I mean, Cool Fire Studios does this, right? They understand that a lot of these smaller type shows will attract the right audience and they can monetize that. It doesn't have to be the Beyonce audience. You don't need,
Yeah.
I mean, yay, Beyonce for the size of her audience. Woo, go girl. But not all of us. I mean, you know, if that's your goal, you know, not to say you can't do it. I'm not going to ever say that, but start with something that you can really do, and you know, and then find those people that are going to love what you're talking about and serve them.
I love that. And I think in what you just said, there's this idea of if you get the right audience and you provide value to them, that's going to convert into business for you. It's going to convert into clients for you. And, you know, I keep thinking if you have, you know, this group of people who are tuning in and listening to you and they're the right people, you can do things like off the cuff say, hey, you know, this is my free thing. Go sign up for my email list. Or, hey, I just launched this new product. Why don't you go check it out? And because you've been
Exactly.
providing value, because you've been interesting, they're going to respond to that.
Right, exactly. I mean, so as you know, providing value is a big deal. So if you're providing something that is entertaining or, you know, what have you to people, they are going to listen. And then when you're saying, hey, I've got this, they will follow along with you.
Yeah. So you said earlier that in your podcast, at the end, you ask them questions that are completely unrelated.
Right.
What types? I've been curious the whole time now. What types of questions are you asking them?
Oh my gosh. Well, I've asked some pretty silly ones. So let's see. One of my favorites was I had on this gentleman. His name is Joe Steensma. He's at Washington University. He's a professor out there, and he teaches birds and business. And the whole
Birds
idea
and
is
business.
he
Okay.
teaches businesses how to be like birds. Birds don't waste anything. Okay, so here's your business, and we're not going to waste stuff anymore. We're going to be like
Okay.
birds. But he's a bird expert, which is really helpful to have because I literally emailed him the other day and went, Joe, I want birdhouses. What kind should I get for this area? But when I had him on, one of my questions to him was, okay, Disney princesses. He went, oh no. I went, just wait. and I said, Disney princesses, it's like they walk around and little birds are around them and a bird will land on their shoulder. What bird do you want to land on your shoulder? So yeah, that was a fun question. You have to listen to the podcast to know what he said. Yeah. But I asked those kinds of questions. They're in their wheelhouse, but there's usually a fun element to it.
Very cool. So let's plug your podcast a little bit. What's the name? Where can they find it?
So the name of it is Michmash. It's M-I-C-H-M-A-S-H, all smushed together. I like to smush words together for whatever reason, so it's Michmash. And the main place to find it really, I mean, is either on SoundCloud or iTunes. Those are the two main places. I tend to lead people to iTunes, which doesn't, I will tell your audience now, does not give you the greatest analytics, but they're working on it. That's what I've heard. But that tends to be the place everybody knows.
Oh, very cool. And then I guess another easy way would be, since you take all friends requests, right? As long as they're a real person, the easy way would be to friend you and then watch the Facebook Live and go from there.
Yeah, as long as I know that you're, you know, I mean, believe me, I get some, I see through them all the time. I'm like, that's not a real person.
Well, really cool, Mich. I really appreciate you coming on. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us about podcasting. Is there anything else you'd want us to know, or any other crazy antic or question you have?
You know what I will put out there, because you brought up the thing about TEDx wanting to be a speaker. Sure. And it's hot. People, I mean, I cannot tell you how many people contact me because they would like to do a TED Talk one day. So I will let them know that our website is tedxgatewayarch.org, and to keep an eye on that, because we do hold auditions once a year. So it's for probably a year or so away from holding our next audition, but then again, we change things all the time. So you just have to keep an eye out, go to our Facebook page. There actually is a speaker page dedicated on our site where when we open up auditions, then people can submit their ideas.
And not everyone is in this group is local. So just in case you don't know, Tedx Gateway Arch is the local St. Louis TEDx event. And I think, Mich, you'd support me in saying that if you want to do a TED Talk, look for your local group and start there. Start local first.
There are many TEDx's. I mean, I think it's up to 1,200 now.
Wow.
You know, so every April, I go up to New York for TED Fest. And, you know, we usually get about 500 TEDx organizers from 60 countries that we all meet and become better TEDx's. So there is a TEDx in your area. And if there isn't, well, you can apply for a license and have your own TEDx.
I thought you were going to say, come on down to St. Louis. But yeah, you can apply and run your own too.
Sure.
You know, you said auditions are a year away, but I mean, if you're preparing for a TED Talk, you might want a year to prepare that stuff. So mark it on your calendar, join the TEDx. So I'll put the link to tedxgatewayarch.org in our comments right after this ends, and I'll also write the name of your podcast, which is Michmash, and we'll talk later.
I can send you the link to that too.
Okay, great, yeah, and we'll post it right there in the comments. Okay, thanks, Mich.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.